You felt it happen again, didn't you? That moment when someone looked through you as if you were invisible, spoke over you as if your voice carried no weight, dismissed your thoughts as if they were the ramblings of a child. The familiar burn of humiliation spread across your chest, that acidic taste of powerlessness coating your throat. You wanted to defend yourself, to prove your worth, to show them they couldn't treat you that way. But even as the words formed in your mind, you felt something deeper, a recognition that this moment was more than just another slight. This was a test, a crossroads where your response would either cement their view of your weakness or shatter their assumption of your compliance. You've been taught that standing up for yourself means fighting back immediately, that respect is demanded through force, that silence equals weakness. But what if everything you've been taught about handling disrespect has been designed to keep you exactly where they want you, reactive, predictable, and ultimately powerless? What if the strongest response to disrespect isn't the one that feels most satisfying in the moment, but the one that serves your deepest interests over time? The moment someone disrespects you is the moment you discover who you really are. Not who you pretend to be, not who you hope to become, but who you are when stripped of pretense and forced to choose between your immediate emotional needs and your long-term strategic advantage. Most people fail this test spectacularly, and their failure becomes the foundation of their continued mistreatment. But you're about to learn what Machiavelli understood centuries ago, that the most powerful response to disrespect is often the one that requires you to delay the very satisfaction your wounded ego craves most. Your first instinct, the one that feels so natural it seems like truth itself, is to match their energy with your own, to prove you won't be diminished by raising your voice, by defending your position, by showing them they've made a mistake in underestimating you. This reaction feels justified, because it is justified. You deserve better treatment. You have worth that should be acknowledged. Your ideas have value that merits consideration. But here's what your justified anger blinds you to. Every time you react emotionally to disrespect, you become exactly what they expected you to become. Predictable, controllable, weak. The person who triggered your reaction now owns your emotional state. They dictated your behavior with a few dismissive words or a contemptuous glance. In that moment of emotional reactivity, you handed them the remote control to your inner world, and they're pressing all the buttons while watching you dance to their manipulations. Machiavelli recognized this fundamental truth about human nature. Reactive people are controllable people, and controllable people cannot command genuine respect. The moment you allow someone else's disrespect to determine your emotional state, you've already lost the only game that matters, the game of psychological sovereignty. Your anger, your need to defend yourself, your desperate urge to prove your worth, these aren't signs of strength. They're advertisements for your deepest vulnerabilities, flashing neon signs that tell everyone exactly how to manipulate you. In the future, the person who can trigger you with a few words owns you more completely than any master ever owned a slave, because at least the slave knew he was enslaved. You've convinced yourself that your reactivity is strength when it's actually the most sophisticated form of bondage ever devised. But there's another way, a path that requires you to abandon everything you think you know about strength and weakness, about justice and fairness, about standing up for yourself and maintaining your dignity. Instead of reacting to disrespect, you implement the most powerful weapon in all of human psychology, the strategic pause. This isn't the paralysis of fear or the hesitation of uncertainty. This is the disciplined delay that separates emotional children from strategic adults. In that pause, while your emotions scream for immediate action, while every fiber of your being demands you respond right now, you do something that most people are incapable of doing. You think. Not with your wounded ego or your triggered emotions, but with the cold, calculating part of your mind that exists beyond the reach of their manipulation. During this pause, you're not just controlling your response. You're creating a psychological void that forces the disrespectful person to confront their own actions without the satisfaction of your predictable reaction. They said something designed to trigger you, and instead of the explosion they expected, they get nothing. Just your calm, assessing gaze as you decide how to respond, rather than letting your response be decided for you. This moment of silence becomes a power statement more devastating than any words you could have spoken, because it demonstrates something they didn't expect and can't control: your complete sovereignty over your own reactions. The strategic pause serves as both shield and sword. It protects you from saying or doing something you'll regret, while simultaneously forcing them to sit in the uncomfortable reality of their own behavior without the distraction of your emotional response. They begin to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, how you'll respond. This uncertainty is far more powerful than any immediate counterattack, because uncertainty creates anxiety, and anxiety makes people reconsider their actions. In that pause, you transform from a victim of their disrespect into an enigma they can't quite decode. And enigmas, unlike reactive people, command respect through the simple power of unpredictability. But the pause is just the beginning. During those crucial seconds while they wonder about your silence, you're conducting a rapid but thorough assessment that will determine not just your immediate response, but your entire strategic approach to this person going forward. You're evaluating 4 critical factors with the precision of a military strategist planning a campaign. First, you assess who this person is in relation to your goals and interests. Are they someone whose opinion matters to your advancement, or are they irrelevant to your success? Do they have power over opportunities you want, or are they simply another voice in a crowd you'll never need to impress? Second, you analyze who witnessed this disrespect and what the political implications might be. Was this a private slight that affects only your relationship with them, or was it a public display that requires public correction? Are there people present whose opinions of you matter more than maintaining peace with your disrespecter? Third, you rapidly identify what this person values most: their reputation, their position, their relationships, their self-image, because what people value most is what they fear. Losing most, and fear of loss is the most reliable motivator of behavioral change. Fourth, and most importantly, you determine what response serves your long-term strategic interests rather than your short-term emotional needs. This assessment matrix transforms you from a reactive victim into a strategic player. Most people skip this analysis entirely and wonder why their responses feel satisfying in the moment but prove costly over time. They react to how the disrespect made them feel instead of responding to what the situation actually requires. But you've learned to pause, assess, and choose your response based on what serves your ultimate interests, not what soothes your wounded pride. This is the difference between being controlled by your emotions and using your emotions as information in service of your strategy. For minor disrespect or first-time offenses from people who might simply be having a bad day or testing boundaries, unconsciously, your response is measured and corrective rather than destructive. You implement what appears to be a subtle shift but feels like a significant change: the professional chill. Your warmth disappears without dramatic announcement. Your tone becomes formal and measured. Your availability becomes limited. Your accommodation transforms into strict adherence to boundaries. This isn't passive-aggressive behavior, because you're not trying to punish them indirectly while pretending everything is fine. This is the conscious withdrawal of your warmth and flexibility until they demonstrate they understand how to treat you properly. The beauty of this response lies in its deniability and sustainability. You haven't done anything that could be called unprofessional or inappropriate. You've simply become less generous with your time, attention, and emotional energy. If questioned about the change, you can honestly say you're focusing on priorities that matter most to you, which is exactly what you're doing. The disrespectful person feels the shift in your energy immediately. They sense that something has changed in how you relate to them, but they can't accuse you of overreacting because your response is perfectly civilized. This creates a psychological tension that often corrects the behavior without requiring any direct confrontation. They begin to miss the warmth and accommodation they took for granted, and this loss motivates them to reconsider how they interact with you. Your strategic chill becomes their first lesson in the cost of disrespecting you, a lesson that's far more effective than any argument could ever be. When someone continues their disrespectful behavior despite your initial correction, or when the disrespect escalates in severity, your response must escalate proportionally. This is where you implement the strategic withdrawal, not the dramatic exit of someone who's been wounded, but the calculated removal of your presence, attention, and cooperation from their experience. You become mysteriously busy when they need something from you. You're unavailable when they seek your input or advice. You're absent from social situations where they expect your participation. Your cooperation, which they've come to rely on, becomes sporadic and unpredictable. This isn't petty avoidance or childish sulking. This is the deliberate reduction of your value in their life until they begin to understand what they're losing through their continued disrespect. The power of strategic withdrawal lies in its sustainability and its impact on their daily experience. Unlike an emotional outburst that they can dismiss as your problem, your absence creates a practical void in their world that they can't ignore. Projects become more difficult without your input. Social gatherings lose energy without your presence. Problems that you usually help solve suddenly become their problems to solve alone. You don't announce this withdrawal or explain your increasing unavailability. You simply become less accessible to them while remaining fully engaged with others, who treat you with proper respect. This contrast becomes impossible for them to ignore. They watch you being warm, helpful, and available with others while experiencing your growing distance themselves. The lesson is clear without being stated. How they treat you determines how much of your value they get to access. Your strategic withdrawal teaches them to associate their disrespectful behavior with the loss of something they didn't realize they valued until it was gone. Your positive attention and willing cooperation. Sometimes disrespect occurs in public settings where witnesses observe both the slight and your response. In these situations, allowing disrespect to pass without comment sends a message not just to the person who disrespected you, but to everyone who witnessed it. This is when strategic public correction becomes necessary, not through emotional outburst or dramatic confrontation, but through calm, measured, devastating clarity that demonstrates your refusal to accept disrespectful treatment while maintaining the high ground through superior emotional control. Your response is surgical in its precision. You address their specific behavior with factual accuracy, without raising your voice or losing composure. That's an interesting way to characterize what I actually said, which was, or I'm curious about what you hope to accomplish by interrupting me mid-sentence. The power of this response lies not in its aggression, but in its unshakable calm. You're not attacking them emotionally. You're simply highlighting their behavior with the kind of clinical observation that makes everyone in the room suddenly aware of what just happened. This public correction serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It establishes clear boundaries for the disrespectful person while demonstrating to witnesses that you won't accept poor treatment silently. It showcases your emotional control and communication skills while highlighting their lack of the same. Most importantly, it shifts the social dynamic so that they, not you, become the person who looks unreasonable and out of control. Your calm precision makes their disrespect appear even more inappropriate by contrast. The public nature of this correction sends ripples through your social or professional network, establishing your reputation as someone who handles conflict with grace while refusing to be diminished by others' poor behavior. For serious, repeated, or particularly damaging disrespect, your response must involve your broader network and social environment. This isn't gossip or complaint. It's strategic information sharing designed to ensure that influential people in your shared circles understand who they're dealing with. You share factual observations about behavioral patterns with key stakeholders, not to destroy the disrespectful person, but to protect yourself and others from their toxic influence while creating social pressure for behavioral change. Your approach is measured and professional. I've noticed John tends to interrupt and dismiss ideas in meetings. Have you observed this pattern? Or, Sarah seems to struggle with respectful communication. I'm curious about your experience working with her. You're not making accusations or sharing gossip. You're discussing observable behavior patterns with people who need accurate information to make good decisions about collaboration, promotion, or inclusion. This network effect creates consequences that extend far beyond your personal relationship with the disrespectful person. Their behavior begins to affect their reputation, their opportunities, and their social standing within your shared environment. Other people become more cautious about including them in important conversations or trusting them with significant responsibilities. They start to face the natural social consequences of their disrespectful behavior from multiple directions, rather than just from you. Your strategic information sharing leverages the power of collective judgment while maintaining your position as the reasonable party who's simply sharing relevant observations with people who need to know. The disrespectful person discovers that their behavior toward you has implications that extend far beyond your personal relationship, and this broader consequence often motivates behavioral change more effectively than any direct confrontation ever could. The most severe response in your arsenal is reserved for those who have proven themselves fundamentally disrespectful despite clear boundaries, escalating consequences, and multiple opportunities to correct their behavior. This is complete exclusion from your consideration, cooperation, and social network, the total removal of their access to anything you control or influence. This person ceases to exist in your professional calculations, social planning, and collaborative opportunities. You don't argue with them anymore because there's no point in arguing with someone whose opinion no longer matters to you. You don't try to change them because you've accepted that they're incapable of treating you with basic respect. You simply remove them from your sphere of influence and concern as completely as if they had moved to another planet. This exclusion is absolute but quiet. You don't announce it or explain it, because explanations suggest that their understanding or approval still matters to you. You simply implement it with the finality of natural law. They lose access to your ideas, connections, opportunities, and social validation. Invitations stop coming, collaborations end, referrals disappear. Your network, influenced by your strategic information sharing, begins to exclude them as well. This isn't cruelty, it's the natural consequence of their choice to consistently disrespect someone who offered them multiple opportunities to behave better. The exclusion protocol teaches the most powerful lesson of all, that some bridges, once burned through persistent disrespect, cannot be rebuilt. They learn that your respect, once lost through their own actions, cannot be regained through apologies or promises of future improvement. This finality often shocks people who assumed they could treat you poorly indefinitely without facing permanent consequences. But it's necessary for maintaining your psychological sovereignty and protecting your energy for relationships that actually serve your interests and well-being. Each level of your response system teaches a crucial psychological lesson about cause and effect, about the relationship between behavior and consequence, about the reality that how people treat you determines how much access they get to your value and attention. Most people test boundaries unconsciously, pushing to see how much they can get away with before facing real consequences. Your graduated response system creates a clear, predictable relationship between their behavior and your treatment of them that becomes impossible to ignore or misinterpret. They learn to associate disrespecting you with losing access to your warmth, cooperation, opportunities, and eventually your presence entirely. This isn't manipulation, because you're not trying to control their behavior for your benefit. You're simply protecting yourself from their poor treatment while allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. They can treat you however they want, but they cannot escape the results of those choices. Your consistent implementation of appropriate consequences creates a psychological conditioning effect that modifies their behavior more effectively than any argument, explanation, or confrontation ever could. They begin approaching you with more consideration, not because they fear you, but because they understand that disrespecting you carries predictable costs that they'd rather avoid. Your response system transforms you from someone who hopes for better treatment into someone who creates the conditions that make better treatment inevitable through the elegant application of natural consequence. As you consistently implement these strategic responses over time, something remarkable happens to how people perceive and interact with you. Your reputation undergoes a fundamental transformation that affects every relationship and opportunity in your life. People begin approaching you with genuine respect, not the superficial politeness they show everyone, but the deeper consideration they reserve for those they recognize as psychologically sovereign. They seek your advice because your calm handling of difficult situations demonstrates wisdom and emotional intelligence that reactive people can never display. They include you in important conversations because they trust your ability to contribute thoughtfully rather than emotionally. They treat your time as valuable because you've proven it has value by protecting it consistently. Your strategic responses to disrespect become advertisements for your strength, composure, and leadership potential. Others observe how you handle conflict and disrespect, and they want to learn from your example. Your ability to remain calm under pressure, to respond strategically rather than reactively, to maintain your dignity while addressing poor behavior. These qualities mark you as someone worthy of respect and emulation. People gravitate toward individuals who demonstrate this level of psychological control because such individuals create environments where mutual respect flourishes. Your reputation becomes self-reinforcing. As more people treat you with respect, fewer people attempt to disrespect you because the social environment around you makes such behavior obviously inappropriate and likely to be met with swift, proportional consequence. You discover that respect isn't something you have to demand or fight for. It's something that flows naturally toward those who demonstrate they deserve it through consistent boundary enforcement and strategic response to violations. You now understand what Machiavelli recognized centuries ago, that respect is not a gift freely given by others, but a condition you create through the consistent demonstration of your standards and the reliable enforcement of consequences when those standards are violated. Your responses to disrespect are no longer emotional reactions driven by wounded pride or desperate need for validation. They have become strategic choices designed to train your environment to treat you with the consideration and dignity that every human being deserves, but few people actually receive. You've transformed from someone who gets disrespected and wonders why the world seems so cruel, into someone who commands respectful treatment through the quiet certainty of measured consequence and unshakable boundaries. This transformation isn't about becoming cold, cruel, or calculating in your relationships with others. It's about becoming sovereign over your own treatment, about refusing to accept less than you deserve while maintaining the grace and dignity that separate strategic response from emotional reaction. You understand now that hoping for better treatment is passive and powerless, while creating the conditions that make better treatment inevitable is active and empowering. When disrespect occurs, and it will occur, because testing boundaries is human nature, you don't lose control of your emotions or question your worth. You don't waste energy arguing with people who've revealed their character through their actions. Instead, you implement strategy. You assess the situation with clarity, choose your response based on what serves your long-term interests, and execute that response with the calm precision of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. You've learned to respond rather than react, to create consequences rather than hope for change, to command respect through demonstration rather than demand it through argument. In a world full of people who react emotionally to every slight and wonder why they're not taken seriously, you stand apart as someone who has mastered the most important skill in human relations: the ability to maintain your psychological sovereignty, regardless of how others choose to behave. This sovereignty transforms every area of your life, because respect in one relationship creates respect in all relationships, and self-respect becomes the foundation upon which all other forms of respect are built.